What is going on, everybody? My name is Will, and thanks for checking out this episode of The Monthly. Question for you: how do you get your music? Seemingly everyone streams their music these days, and seemingly everyone has a sister whose boyfriend has been crowdfunding his self-written rap EP for the past 3 years. And while it's pretty common knowledge that companies like Spotify are monetarily bad for artists, in reality things are even worse for songwriters. Interactive streaming services definitely give writers the short end of the stick, and surprise, it's actually more the federal government's fault than it is Apple's or Spotify's. This story is the perfect example of America trying to do the right thing over 100 years ago before Charlie Browning the football and f***ing over the little guy for years to come, all while still failing to acknowledge how insane its practices actually are. You know, the American way. Let's get started. To kick things off, I'm gonna hit you with the numbers. Say a song gets 500 million streams on Spotify, and the record label gets $2 million off the track. Typically, only around 10% of that revenue eventually makes it to the songwriters. That 10% then gets split among the team. So a writer on a team of 3 might only get $67,000 from the song. And yeah, to a struggling writer eating McDonald's for breakfast and McDonald's for dinner and using McDonald's napkins as paper towels and using McDonald's sweet and sour sauce as moisturizer. What? You are. To a struggling writer, $67,000 seems like a lot of money. To anybody, 67 grand seems like a lot. But let's take a look at what kinds of songs get 500 million streams. We're talking about Bodak Yellow, Redbone, No Tears Left to Cry, DNA. People over 40 are like, what the fuck is going on? Billie Jean, whoever he is. Can you see where I'm going with this? A handful of songwriters will write Bodak Yellow after Bodak Yellow after Bodak Yellow. A few songwriters might write one No Tears Left to Cry in their career, and most songwriters won't even come close. So let's try knocking off a zero. Now we're looking at a song with 50 million streams and a $6,700 payout. There are still songs on Justin Bieber's latest album with 50 million streams. So even if Mr. Haley Baldwin here picks up one of your songs, you might still fall short of that 91 Saturn you've had your eyes on. But wait, I saw part of a DJ Khaled music video once. That guy can afford cars and jewelry and misogyny without repercussions. You're not wrong. Producers and recording artists like disc jockey Khaled, that's his government name, can make big money, even if the same isn't always true for the people who write their songs. There's a blatant pay disparity in the music industry, and the reason for it goes back over a century. In 1909, the US Congress got spooked by the impending monopolization of the player piano roll industry. Congress then stepped in to regulate payment to the publishers and songwriters of player piano rolls. And you may very well be asking yourself, what the hell is a player piano roll? It's a new setup, give me a break, I'm working out the kinks. This is a player piano roll, and the fact that I even needed to show you that is the fucking point, friends. Because the government regulation of songwriters in the 1909 player piano roll industry still affects songwriters 110 years later. And that's not all. In 1941, the US Congress got spooked once again by the impending monopolization in the music licensing industry by 2 big licensing companies, ASCAP and BMI. And don't worry, you don't have to remember their names. I'm just flexing my research. And once again, Congress stepped in and set up a consent decree, which basically allowed these companies to do business, but only if they played by the federal government's rules. And as we all know from history, the federal government's rules are always the most fun rules. Today, songwriters make their money in 3 different ways. There's mechanical reproduction, which is sales from vinyl records, CDs, music streaming services, and yes, player piano rolls. There's public performance, when radio shows, bars, and venues play your song. And there's synchronization, when your song is used in movies, TV shows, commercials, and other videos. The first 2, mechanical reproduction and public performance, make up about 75% of the business that songwriters get to take part in. And thanks to the US policy established in 1909 and the consent decree in 1941, the amount of money songwriters get paid via these modes is literally up to 3 federal judges in Washington, D.C., who only revisit the payment of songwriters once every 5 years. Meanwhile, record labels, on the other hand, successfully materialized as we know them today after 1941, meaning they don't fall under the terms of either aforementioned regulatory government actions. This means record labels and their top artists operate in a free market, and they can afford to live in solid gold mansions and pour designer champagne on booties, while songwriters are boiling hot dogs for dinner in their 4-person LA apartments. So it seems songwriters started in a position of power, with a potential monopoly in the beginning of the 20th century, before being kicked to the dirt like some kind of peasants. In a lot of ways, they're like Cersei from Game of Thrones, chopping heads and taking thrones before being dragged naked through the streets of King's Landing. Sorry about the black bars, I really wish I didn't have to censor the female body. You know what? No, can we change that? That's better. What? If they make you do it, you might as well take advantage of the real estate for self-promotion, right? Now, the only difference between Cersei and songwriters is that she managed to claw her way back up to the top. Cersei regained power through murder, betrayal, and brother fucking. And I don't want to rule out the brother fucking, but the question needs to be asked. How do songwriters do the same? I'm not gonna lie, it's an uphill climb. One huge obstacle for writers is that yes, songwriting teams typically get paid 10% of a Spotify streaming payout, but that's a percentage. And it's not like the music industry isn't making enough money. For writers and publishers to get more, labels and artists would conceivably have to give up some of their cut. And as we all know, this guy isn't exactly the generous type. Another obstacle is the people that songwriters have in their corner. Think about the musicians you know in your life. Chances are they're closer to wearing a beanie than a MAGA cap, unless you know country music. Well, as this is a largely legislative issue, songwriters need government representation. And as it turns out, the only politicians willing to stick their necks out for songwriters, and this is true, Republicans. Come on, did you think I'd write an episode about the music industry and not include a record scratch bit? Typically, Democrats have been supportive of giving tech companies like Apple and Google more power by allowing them to play a role in informing tech-related legislation. For songwriters, that's the equivalent of a David versus Goliath boxing match where Democrats are literally injecting Goliath with steroids in between rounds. Meanwhile, Republicans can see songwriters as a growing business with creative products and services to offer. Republicans like the Trump-supporting Doug Collins. He advocates for songwriters all the time. This guy, who looks like somebody put a wig and glasses on the Dewey Decimal System. People under 22 are like, what the f is going on? The Dewey Decimal System, like in a library, which is like a Kindle, but a place. And I'll give credit where credit is due. Republicans are actually managing to make some progress. Just last year, new legislation passed called the Music Modernization Act, a huge win for songwriters. Essentially, it streamlines the music licensing process to make it easier for rights holders to get paid for their music streamed online. But what did they end up renaming the act? The Orrin G. Hatch Music Modernization Act. That's real. And if Orrin Hatch isn't ringing a bell, he's the guy who called Dr. Christine Blasey Ford attractive following her sexual assault testimony.
I think she's an attractive, good witness.
It's a prickly spot to be in. You could be watching this wishing you could help and support songwriters, but it can be tough to do so if you don't want to throw votes at the living dead here. The answer is hazy, but one thing's for sure, it's so important to support smaller musicians and songwriters. Some of those GoFundMes on your Facebook page are legitimately necessary. And if you can't support them financially, support songwriters by looking at your favorite songs, finding out who the writers are, and sharing their names. It's the smallest and easiest way you can help them out, and we need to show our appreciation. After all, take away vocalists and the industry could still consist entirely of electronic dance music. Take away musicians and the industry could still consist entirely of a cappella groups. Take away producers and the industry could still consist entirely of live acoustic tracks. Although, send me straight to hell if any of that ever happens. Take away songwriters though, and we literally don't have songs. Is that a world you want to live in? That's it for this month's episode. My name is Will. Thanks so much for watching The Monthly. Until next time, have a great month.